I got up early one morning and headed out, hunting in the Duffield area of Alberta, Canada. Hi there folks, Spencer Rempel, the Moose Whisperer here, bringing you exciting outdoor adventure and hunting stories from around the world. And today's story comes to you right from here in Alberta, Canada, from my good friend Evan Giesbrecht. Stay tuned to the end of the story to hear more about Evan and the area that he hunts. All right, but for now, let's get straight into the story. It was dark when I got to where we were going, so I wandered real slow through the field. Not too much snow, but crunchy ground. Frozen. Couple of inches of snow. Just starting to break daylight, the grass was really deep too, all the way up to my chest, and white with the sheen of frost. I was hunting in a spot where years before I had given up a shot on what was a trophy buck. This giant 190s buck was moving away from me and would not stop or turn to give me a clean shot. So, hoping there would be another chance one day, I let him go. The chance came for my friend and hunting partner, Chris, who has that beautiful trophy buck on his wall to this day. So every time I go to his house, I have to look at that big, beautiful buck I missed out on and somehow try to be happy for my friend, as well as with the fact that I know I made the right decision. Anyways, back to the story. This is good deer country, and maybe I'll see another trophy whitetail buck. It's just breaking daylight, and I could see there were a few does in the one field that had been cut. In the adjacent field of bush and tall grass, there was a strip of small willows, and I could see antler tips just bobbing along just above the grass and willows. So I went down to one knee to try to steady myself for a shot. But of course, in the tall grass, that didn't work. I needed to be higher, not lower. So I stood up and decided to try to freehand it. With no gun rest, the distance was about 120 yards, so not bad, but when you're huffing and puffing from walking along and trying to take a shot freehand, well, that's kind of stretching it out there a wee bit. I took a couple of breaths and steadied myself. I've shot many deer and other game at this range and was confident I'd make a clean shot. Since most of the deer was obscured by tall grass, with only his head sticking out, at that distance, I wasn't going to go for a headshot. I lined up my crosshairs on his head, dropped them down to the level of his chest, and then over to the right to the breadbasket heart shot. I had a good gun that didn't shoot too fast, and I knew that heavy bullet would be able to pass through the grass without deflecting. A little shaky, but with the exact right timing, boom! I pulled the trigger and the shot rang out. The deer just dropped instantly. Oh, I thought, okay, great, all done. So I walked around this little bit of slough that was between him and I, and coming up on him, I could see him just laying there. I was about 10 yards away from him, right by the small willow patch. In my slow approach and detoured walk, I figured about 10 minutes had passed. Looking at the deer, I saw no movement. No chest moving from breathing, not a leg kicking, nothing. So, with no other spot to place my rifle, I leaned it up against the willows. Took off my jacket, turned around to approach the dead deer. As I turned, I saw the most incredible, unexpected, and scary thing I have ever seen. For one split second, it seemed as if time slowed down. I barely had time to move my hands up in front of my belly and catch those antlers squarely in my hands, not 3 inches from my guts. That deer was alive and well and hell-bent on revenge. That SOB laid into me like 10 miles of bad road. I'm 6 foot tall, 250 pounds, and it was everything I could do to keep from being impaled as he pushed me backwards. I pushed back as hard as I could, and let me tell you, when you're in a life and death situation, the adrenaline kicks in and you become stronger than you ever thought you could be. But the same was true for the deer. If I ran out of steam, he would run me through, and I could tell he wasn't about to lose this fight. So I twisted on his neck with every bit of power and strength, to no avail. I thought, like in the movies, perhaps I could just break his neck, but he was much stronger than that. At times I made headway and pushed him back a few paces. Wow, I heard him suck in air, dig in his feet, and push back on me, pushing me back a few paces. The smell, the sound, the feeling of everything seemed magnified as I truly worried that I would be killed. This went on for some time. It's really hard to tell, but I would estimate over 10 minutes. We pushed back and forth, round and round, and I swear that tall grass was completely laid flat and the earth torn up from feet and hooves for a circumference of probably about 20 yards around us. Nothing I did would discourage that deer from pushing harder, and I could tell that his endurance was better than mine. What can I do? How can I turn the tide on this losing battle? I had my skinning knife in its sheath on my belt, but with both hands on those antlers, how was I to reach it? Holding one antler, jamming my elbow into the other side, I moved my left hand and pulled my knife. I came around the side and stabbed him right in the neck. Instantly, he stopped pushing and took 2 steps back. In that split second, he looked at me with wide eyes and then lowered his head once more. My rifle had gotten knocked over during the fight, and I had been mentally keeping track of it as I knew it was my ultimate defense. This 1-second break would afford me the time to potentially get it. I turned and dove for the rifle, and although I'm 250 pounds, I'm sure I flew through the air at least 15 feet. Landing on my belly right in front of the rifle, I grabbed it, loaded a bullet in, spun around to fire point blank into the chest of that deer that was already coming down upon me. Well, the hitting power of that rifle at that range was extreme. The fight was over, and he dropped dead to the ground. I fell back into the snow with the greatest feeling of relief I have ever had. With my body screaming for oxygen, my lungs breathing as hard as they could, adrenaline and shock causing my hands and body to shake, I lay there, looking at the sky with one eye still on that deer and thanking God that I was alive. It took quite some time to recover from that and find the energy to field dress and pull that deer out of there. He was a nice buck, 4 points on each side. Not a trophy size, but his antlers are on my wall. He may not have been the biggest deer I ever shot, but he definitely was the toughest. Well, I'd like to thank my friend Evan Giesbrecht for sending in that amazing story. Now, I have a ton of hunting stories myself. I've heard 2 tons of hunting stories from all my friends, and that is the first time I've ever heard of someone having to wrestle and knife a deer and shoot them point blank just to save their own life. That was truly an amazing story, and I hope, Evan, that you never have another one like that. All right, folks, Evan grew up in the West Kootenays of British Columbia in an isolated little area called Cooper Creek. And you know what? He was a bush kid. He was one of those kids who spent all of his time hunting and fishing and running around exploring, from catching frogs to trapping marten and beaver. That guy's done it all through his childhood living there out in the bush. Anyways, he is still that kind of guy. You'll find him, if he has any spare time, he's out in the bush. He's scouting territory. He's making trails. He's hunting. He's fishing. He's just that outdoorsman kind of guy to the max. A real pleasure of a man to know, and you'd never find a better hunting partner. All right, folks, that's Evan's story, but I'd like to tell yours. Why don't you send in your stories to me? Send them in to info@themoosewhisperer.com. You can send them in by writing them out and typing it, or you can just send a voice message if you like, and I'll type it out. I'll tell your story. I'll tell your story to the world. You know what? All us hunters out there, we got to get those stories out there. We're getting to be old timers, Things ain't the same as they were before. Send in your stories, folks. I'll tell them to the world. Thanks for watching, and more stories to come.